There we go.
Anyway, hi everyone, and Jocelyn, and it's video 16 on reinventing my world. Now, today I'd like to talk with someone, or I will be talking with someone who I met 2 years ago. His name is Eric Heiden, and Eric is involved with company down east, Neurogym. And I'm going to get him to talk about that as well as I'm going to ask you a few more questions, Eric.
Yeah,
So, welcome. Oh, and everybody else out there, please hit the like button. What it does, hopefully, it'll um, promote the video in the algorithms, and maybe eventually more people will get to see this. Anyway, Eric, you have a master's in science. You're
mhm.
a kinesiologist and also involved with Neurogym in Ottawa. First of all, I know very little about kinesiology aside from brain jam, but I mean, that's only a teeny tiny portion. So, what is a kinesiologist?
Sure. So it's a regulated profession in Ontario. I'm not sure about other jurisdictions. There's a Canadian Kinesiology Alliance that sort of oversees kinesiology as a profession. Now, it wasn't that when I started. So, when I went to school to get my bachelor's degree, kinesiology was just an area of study, kind of like biology or neuroscience. And it's essentially the study of human movement. So, in a kinesiology program, you learn about all the different things that go into the complexity that makes our bodies move the way that they do. So we study things like the physiology of the cardiovascular system, how it delivers energy to the parts of our body to make them move, the muscles and how they uh, create force, create movement, and then the how the system of the cardiovascular system supplies the muscles with what they need for it, and then all the things to train all of the above. So how do you take somebody and train their cardiovascular system to do what it does, at increasingly higher levels? How do you train the muscles to get bigger and stronger? And then we also learn about the brain and the motor system, which is another essential part of movement. And so we learn a little bit about how the nervous system comes together to coordinate all of these things into skillful movement, how we learn movements from childhood, into adulthood. And then the training part of that is, so how do you then go and teach someone movement? And so there are lots of research to draw on about how children learn to move, how adolescents learn to move, and how adults learn to move. And so we cover in kinesiology sort of all of those different areas, as well as some other things like you can study nutrition, and then you can study specialized areas as well, like ergonomics. So it would be human movement specific to people's work. And so, how do you design work environments that are suited to people's bodies so they don't get injured? So, it's really a field of study that can go in several different directions. I've taken it in the direction, of course, of helping people recover movement after injuries to their nervous systems like stroke and spinal cord injury, or conditions like multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease, all of those things that affect the motor system. But with an understanding of all the other systems, you can kind of work with someone to help them move better, whether they're starting from a normal body and trying to become an athlete, or whether they're starting from after an injury and trying to just move a little bit better. or whether you're starting from an injury and trying to become an athlete, any of those combinations. Yeah.
Wow, so it certainly works hand in glove with rehab medicine, definitely. Uh, Now, when we talk about brain injuries, they talk a lot about neuroplasticity. And I'm going to get you to explain the definition of it. And yeah, what does it mean?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it refers generally to the brain's capacity to change its structure and change its connectivity and change its function. So it's the brain's capacity to learn and grow, really. Um, and it's kind of a term, I guess, that I want to say new, but it's kind of going on probably 30 years that, some form of neuroplasticity has been understood. I think we're still, though, coming to grips with the implications of that. So going back, 30 years plus ago, I think the nervous system was viewed in sort of scientific circles as a static structure, that the brain connections, the connections between neurons that you had, was something that was fixed. It developed according to a plan. And then once it reached maturity, it was static. And if you damaged it, it was not going to change. You were just stuck with the
Yeah.
damaged state. What we understand, I think, more now, and like I say, going back 30 years to the point where imaging allows us to look inside the brain and really look at those connections, what we came to understand is that the connections between neurons in the brain are plastic, that they're changeable, and depending on experiences that we have or things that we engage in, we can change connections between neurons. They can be strengthened, they can weaken, new ones can form. And that gives us that concept of a plastic or changeable brain, that it's not this structure that's fixed. It's something that, as we have experiences and as we deliberately engage in activities, our brains change as a result of that. And it's got implications for so many different fields, but the one of them that we're discussing, I guess, the most would be after you have an injury to that system, whether it's from a stroke, a brain injury, anything that sort of disrupts that system. I guess the important implication is you're not stuck in that state. So yes, connections have been, damaged or severed, neurons may have died, but this capacity of the brain to change its structure, to build new connections, to change connectivity between neurons gives us some capacity to learn new things even after an injury. And the implication of that is, if we have an injury that limits our ability to move, through deliberate practice, we can train to some degree the capacity of our brain and body to move that injured part again, or move that part that's difficult to
Oh, I know.
move again.
And I mean, at one time, like you say, you had a stroke or an injury, forget it. Sorry, we can't do anything. And now, it's just
Mm-hmm.
amazing, right? Now, I'm going to ask a little bit about your background and tell me about Dr. Avi Nativ. Am I saying that correctly?
That's, yeah, yeah, yeah. So Avi is the founder of Neurogym, which is the clinic where I work. He's now retired, so in his place, I've taken over day-to-day management of the clinic, and he's now my partner. Although he doesn't work with us day to day, but he is the person that started the clinic and kind of created the system of training that we use today. And so he was part of, as a PhD in kinesiology, part of kind of the early wave of researchers and academics that took sort of the implications of brain plasticity and really put them into practice with people recovering from injuries. So going back to the 1980s, when the concept of plasticity was very, very new in neuroscience. Avi was taking that into clinical practice with patients. So he was many years ahead of therapy practice. The science was there, but it hadn't made its way kind of down to most therapy practices. So what we were doing, or what he was doing with Neurogym in the 80s and 90s, was quite radical, but was based on the science that we kind of accept as, of course, uh, as current now. Yeah.
No, like so at Neurogym, uh, who exactly do you work with? What are and number one, is there any age limits or um like I know you deal with stroke people. What about
Yeah.
injuries and so on?
Yeah, we do work with a little bit of everything. Our main clients, I would say, kind of fall into two broad categories, and they're things that I would call kind of like event type injuries. So things that happen, at one time. So it might be a stroke, a brain injury, a spinal cord injury, might be, it happens kind of as a single event, and then it changes something, about the nervous system. So part of our clientele is sort of in that category. The other part would be, long-term conditions. So they might be progressive conditions like multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease or neuropathy. We work with people sometimes with genetic muscle conditions as well, where they're progressive in nature. And the work that we do kind of physically with people is quite similar in both situations, but after like an event type injury, we're trying to sort of build up function and kind of recover function as possible. And then with the progressive type conditions, we're trying to keep people at a level of function. So their condition may continue to create problems with their nervous system, but we're trying to kind of work with them to physically keep them doing the things that they want to do. That's broadly kind of our category. There isn't really an age limit. I think we've worked with kids as young as 3 or 5. I think we've seen some babies just as consults, to kind of, you can't really give instructions to a baby, but you can kind of say to parents, we'll try and encourage them to do these kinds of things. And we've worked with people up to people in their 90s. I don't think we've had a 100-year-old in the clinic, although this weekend in Ottawa at the marathon there was a 100-year-old who did a 5 kilometer race. But yeah, we've worked with a little bit of everything.
That's awesome. Like, I mean, and as I'm getting older, it's so nice to know that, wow, some people actually believe that I might be able to do more, right? That is really uplifting and heartwarming for sure. Now, here's you use a lot of
Yeah,
different uh equipment. Then just what is a bungee mobility trainer, for example?
sure. I guess the best way to start to explain that is our approach to doing training and doing rehabilitation, coming from this idea of the plastic brain. In order to kind of make those changes, people need to experience movement in order to learn to do it more efficiently. Like in order to learn to swim, you need to at some point try like a swimming stroke. So um, trying to teach somebody to take a step or to balance when they have poor balance, or to use a leg that has been weakened and that they're not sure whether it's going to hold them or not. What we really need is to kind of create an environment where the person can attempt to do the thing that they're not good at or not quite capable of doing. And then in that environment, it needs to be safe, and we need to be able to allow them to do it with some degree of success. And then that's the starting point for the next time you try it, it'll be a little bit better. The third time, a little bit better than that. And you learn from mistakes that you make. So, in order to kind of learn a movement that you don't do well, you need the chance to try it. And then you'll do it poorly at the beginning, and you'll learn something from all of those attempts. So, that's always been our approach from the very beginning of the clinic. That's what we've tried to do with clients. And we ran into, of course, when somebody isn't able to move well, um, the versions of the things that we want them to try and do are quite difficult. So somebody who has poor standing balance, you want to get them up standing and make them work that skill. But again, because they're not very good at it, they're likely to fall down. So we want to kind of create an environment where they can safely do that. So early on, we started trying to build tools that would physically allow us as therapists to do that with our clients safely. And so some of our machines came, or all of our machines that we've built over the years came from, specific clients and problems saying like, I want to do this with this person, but there's not a safe way to do it, or we need 5 people to make it happen. What could we build that takes care of some of that and would allow one person to do that regularly with them? So our bungee mobility trainer, as an example of that, is it's a device. It's on 4 wheels, and it kind of looks like the kind of baby walkers that people used to have in the 70s and early 80s, where it was a round base with wheels on it, and then like a little swing kind of base, and you put the baby in it, and they could move around standing up, and they would roll in different directions. And it's to the same purpose. So it allows someone to stand up. They're supported from underneath by a seat and a harness that goes across their hips. And they're in kind of a frame. The bungee part of it is the seat is attached to kind of a seesaw mechanism with the person sitting on one end and then a set of bungee cords on the other end and a pivot point in the middle. And when the person sits down, the bungee cords stretch and it lowers them down slowly. When the person stands up, the bungee cords take the tension off, and then they just stand normally. And in that setup, a person can then move around. They can try shifting their weight. They can try standing on one leg. They can try to run. They can jump. They can try and catch a ball, kick a ball. If they fall down, they fall into the bungee mechanism and it catches them. And then we just get them back up again and we do it again. And it's really in that environment where you get to try those things that the brain then has that chance to make new connections, to build new structures. Without the attempt to move, there's really no change in the brain. You really need that active attempt to do something. That's really what drives plasticity. And so that's that real key element is you have to kind of create a situation where somebody can try and have a degree of success. If you try and you're not able to do kind of anything, you learn quickly not to try anymore. So you need to kind of put somebody in an environment where you can make it supportive enough that they have some success, and then you can kind of build on that. So that's the bungee example, but all of our tools are sort of designed in that principle. We want to kind of create a learning environment.
Well, for example, you also have a sit to stand trainer, right? And that for me was a
Yep.
game changer. I'd been flat in my back for 3 months, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it big deal that they use 50-pound counterweights, but they actually enabled me to stand. I felt what it was like to stand on my own 2 feet. That's incredible. And
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're much better at explaining, could you just give people an idea of what a sit to stand trainer is?
Yeah. So, kind of as you described, if you're not able to stand up under your own power, again, according to that principle or that approach of neuroplasticity, what we we want to try and do with somebody that can't stand up on their own is create an environment where the person can try and they can make the movement that they're able to make, and then we turn that into a successful stand. There are devices out there that will put somebody into standing, without any effort on their part, but this is really, the sit to stand is designed to take whatever effort you can put into it and then turn it into a successful movement. So it's kind of a frame type machine. You sit in a chair in front of it. Your knees are up against the knee pad, and then there's a handle at the front that you can kind of reach and hold on to. And then a belt comes down around your hips, and it's going up in front, and it's attached to a counterweight like you described. And the counterweight is assistance. So the amount of weight that you put on is the amount of weight that helps pull you out of the seat. So if your legs are pretty strong, but you're just not quite strong enough to get out of the chair, you might only need kind of 10 pounds of counterweight to kind of pull from your hips, and then that's enough to get into a stand. Or if you haven't stood in a long time or your legs are really weak, you might need more weight to kind of help bring you up out of the chair. But the idea is you, the person in the sit to stand, do as much as you can with your legs and your lower body, and then we can add enough weight to turn that into a successful stand. And then the best part about that is once you can get up, and like you described, once you feel what a stand feels like, and you start to get a sense of, okay, I know the right time to make my push, and you start to get better at that. That's that plasticity, that motor learning side of things. We can decrease the counterweight as you get better. So if your first attempt was 50 pounds, as you do more practice with that, then we can bring it down to 40, 30, 20, 10, and then eventually get to the point where you're able to now, maybe your legs have gotten stronger, you've gotten better at the timing, you've gotten better at figuring out which muscles you're trying to push and where you want your body to be positioned when you make your push. You can learn to stand up on your own without the need of the machine anymore. Yeah. And that's really important is you can kind of create that environment that allows somebody to get started, but it has to be progressive. So you want to be able to kind of continue to present challenges, but manageable challenges. The challenges always have to be kind of in manageable degrees. The next stage is something you can reach with a little bit of practice and a little bit of effort. And then that's the way you build new skills and build function back.
Yeah, no, like again, I can't say enough about how incredible it was to be able to feel myself standing. And
Mm-hmm.
you know what? It took 3 or 4 weeks, but the weights, like you say, gradually got less and less. And then they finally said, okay, good, we're on to the next thing. And I thought, no, no, let me enjoy this. No rest for the wicked. They pushed me on. But anyway,
Yeah.
so in other words, if I was to ask you which these machines are most important, I am guessing you're going to tell me they're all important, right?
I think so. They all serve a particular purpose or a particular stage. So sometimes, when we work with somebody in the clinic, we might start by doing sit to stands because that starts a person off. I mean, sit to stand is such an important movement because to a large degree it determines where we live, right? If you're able to stand, you have so many more options for living at home, transferring. So it's such a critical one, kind of early stages, and often we'll focus on that because it is so important to what environment somebody might live in. But as you progress and as the legs get stronger, that opens up new possibilities, right? So once you can stand and once you can kind of spend time on your legs, we can the road, then maybe shifting your weight from side to side is possible. If you can do that, if you can shift your weight and lift a foot, then walking becomes possible. And then something like the bungee mobility trainer becomes a possibility for carrying that into another stage and introducing a new functional skill. Like if you can stand, what about doing a couple of steps to
Yeah.
pivot and transfer and sit down? So I think each thing that you do, or at least the way we look at it in the clinic, each thing that you do, each stage that you kind of get to, opens up five other possibilities, or several other possibilities of things that we might be able to reach and might be able to train. And then each one we approach the same way. You kind of create an environment where you can do the first rudimentary attempt at that, and then as it gets better, you just take away some of the supports, make it more challenging, and then when you get to the next stage, there's another bunch of branches of places you could go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering, is there any place for this equipment in long-term care facilities as well?
Yes, and that's a great question, and there is actually a lot of our equipment in long-term care facilities now. It was so we created kind of all these pieces of equipment in our clinic. The first versions were built in someone's garage, and then as time went on, we got professional manufacturing and did all the standards and engineering and things like that for it. And eventually, we were manufacturing these tools and selling them through a company called Neurogym Technologies. In 2018, before that, Neurogym Technologies sold a lot of this equipment, and a lot of it did go to long-term care homes. That was kind of the first big market, I think, for the machines. Initially, we thought it would go to other rehab clinics, but that was very, very slow to happen. I think we're still relatively unique as an outpatient clinic that uses this equipment. Most of it is being used right now in hospitals and long-term care centers. But it was really appealing to long-term care centers because people's ability to transfer is so critical there. Your ability to transfer really sort of determines I don't want to reduce it to business, but determines how expensive people are to care for. Like somebody that requires, two people to transfer takes more time, takes more. They may have to use incontinence products if they require a lot of people to transfer them to the toilet because staff are too scarce or not available. So it was very appealing to long-term care centers to say, we have a device that could help your residents stand better. And if more of your residents, were easier to had an easier time to stand and transfer, it's better for the residents. They have a bit more freedom of movement. They don't have to wait for two people to come and help them transfer. There's lots of benefits. Maybe they can get up out of bed more often because they're not waiting, again for a second person. So we actually, or I actually, a lot of my work with Neurogym in the mid 2010s was working with our long-term care customers to develop programs within their facilities. And it was based on work we did in the clinic. So I would work with the nursing staff and their rehab staff, and we'd kind of come up with plans to sort of target. I would ask them, can we identify sort of the people who had lost the ability to transfer in the last 3 months? And we made the connection between, these are the people that are in increased risk of pressure ulcers. And then if we identify those people and make sure to get them on the sit to stand and do training with them, are we going to be able to prevent them from having a pressure sore, 3 months down the line? And that was very successful, and it worked really, really well for long-term care facilities to use the sit to stand for those purposes. And then to kind of continue on with, I guess, that story, in 2018, Medline Industries, which is a large American medical supply company, bought the equipment line from us. So they sold our equipment for many years as a partnership. They're a much larger company than we were ever going to be, and they had have a huge sales force. So they're now the sellers of it's called, but it's now available through Medline, and I think they just kind of continue to use the same approach, the same stories, and I think long term care continues to be one of their big customers. Yeah, in both Canada and the US. And I think in Ontario, we've probably reached the point where more facilities have a sit to stand trainer than don't have one now. So I think it's starting to make its way into a more mainstream, more normal approach, which is great for us to see. To see that become a standard or become normal.
I'm glad to hear that because I remember my mother lost her mobility, and if they would have had access to devices, then it would have kept her mobile for longer than it did. But
Yeah.
I'm looking at our time. We have a whole 5 minutes left. Uh, Eric, is there anything more that you want to add before we leave?
Oh gosh, I mean, I can go on talking about this kind of stuff, I'm sure, for forever. But I think we talked, or I talked a bit about long term care, but I think there's certainly opportunity to do this kind of work well before that, right? As good as it is to kind of do that work when somebody's already arrived at a place where deteriorating mobility has made it, difficult to live at home. There's certainly, I think, a room. I'm just not quite sure how it can work, within the health
Uh,
system, but room to do that earlier. And I don't know what the model for that is. I know our clinic, we work on a physiotherapy model. Most of our clients use private health insurance. But I think there's really a space for prevention in a lot of this, kind of working early rather than working later. And I think that's still a little bit of a mystery as to how that might work. There are in Ontario a few fitness facilities that have some of our equipment and use it like accessible exercise equipment. Um, and I think there's something there to it. I'm just we haven't hit on the right structure or the right model yet for something like that. But yeah, I really do think whether it's in communities, whether it's in retirement communities, where there's room to kind of have the know-how and have the equipment available to do this kind of work for people before it becomes necessary, or before it becomes past time where it needs to be done.
No, I totally agree with you. And I don't know, more education and probably more important, getting our politicians educated that this is important, right? But Eric, thank you so much for
Yeah,
talking today. Um, I
yeah, I enjoyed it, and I enjoy your series. I've watched a lot of the videos so far, so I'm really pleased to be part of it.
Awesome. Well, hey, stay tuned. We will have more. I'm kind of slow on the uptake sometimes, but eventually it gets there.
Yeah,
So you take care. Have a great day.
thanks, Jocelyn.
All right. Bye bye.